Hello again, 240. In this video, we will conclude Chapter 17, the democratization of sports, with a look at snowboarding and mountain biking and other extreme sports that have developed in the 21st century and the end of the 20th century. And similar issues surrounded the rapid development of snowboarding after the first snowboards were introduced at the nation's ski resorts during the 1960s. Many a confrontation occurred when traditional skiers protested. Eventually, snowboarders were grudgingly accepted by skiers, and their appearance became commonplace by the mid-1980s as a truce fell over the nation's slopes. Much of the conflict seemed to grow out of the perceived indifference by snowboarders to established skiing etiquette. Once again, the preference of many snowboarders for the grunge clothing style offended style-minded skiers. In the case of snowboards, however, traditional capitalistic impulses prevailed because ski resort operators found it expedient to sell lift tickets to the snowboarders. And by 2010, an estimated 7 million snowboarders hit the slopes each winter, with more than half of those enthusiasts thought to be under the age of 21. And the resorts were building trails for them to use exclusive snowboarding techniques on. And Catching Air from Photolibre.com gallery, and this is somebody in Chamonix, France, in the Alps. The fact that snowboarding became an official sport at the 1998 Winter Olympics in Japan attests to its acceptance. 2 women's and 2 men's events were held at Nagano. The competition made for stirring television coverage and did much to stimulate the popularity of competitive snowboarding. The sport's first superstar was the American Shaun White, whose daring high-flying exploits in the half-pipe event won him gold medals at the 2006 and 2010 Winter Games. In 2010, on Vancouver's Cypress Mountain, the 24-year-old California native became an international sensation when he outdistanced his competition when he successfully completed what he called his daring, high-flying double McTwist that dazzled television audiences around the globe. The triumph of board culture was made complete when an American snowboarding team competed in baggy blue denim pants and oversized red and white flannel shirts. And there's the Flying Tomato, Shaun White, from Adrian Dennis, an Associated Press photographer, and Getty Images, in an article by Rick Mace in the Chicago Tribune.com from February the 7th, 2017. The commercial appeal of snowboarding and skateboarding produced multi-million-dollar sales and equipment each year. A similar commercial success accompanied the rapid growth in popularity of the mountain bike. This sturdy design construction was introduced in the 1970s, and within a few years, sales exceeded those of conventional thin-tire road racing bikes. The mountain bike appealed to all ages. It was the product of the ingenuity of the biking enthusiasts from Northern California, who modified traditional bike design to encourage off-road biking. Extra sturdy frames, fat tires, and multiple gears enabled riders to traverse bumpy dirt trails and climb steep hills. Just as women riders in the late 19th century embraced bicycles because they provided a new sense of freedom and independence, so too did active Americans of all ages take to their mountain bikes to ride free of traffic. And by 2010, an estimated 55 million Americans rode mountain bikes. And this is from BikingExpert.com, specialized mountain bike reviews classic. These trends in recreation did not go unnoticed. In 2005, a New York Times article concluded that what had once been a counterculture endeavor had gone mainstream. Looking specifically at young skateboarders donning safety helmets to hit the sidewalks in suburban neighborhoods, Damian Cave noted, what began as a marginalized activity prohibited by many communities and embraced by its early skaters for its go-to-hell attitude has morphed into a mainstream youth sport dominated by doting parents and rules about safety. Even 7-time Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong appeared in advertisements astride an expensive mountain bike, and President George Walker Bush frequently rode his mountain bike with wild abandon at his Texas ranch, much to the delight of journalists. while he forced Secret Service agents to pedal much faster than they desired. Perhaps most significant was that city governments had made peace with skateboarders. More than 2,500 skateboard parks featuring ramps and miniature half-pipes have been constructed by municipal parks and recreation departments. The growing popularity of these new sports was recognized when commercial television network, the Entertainment Sports Programming Network, ESPN, introduced the X Games in 1995. The made-for-television competitions were a clever effort to take commercial advantage of the growing interest in skateboarding and snowboarding, along with other lesser-known extreme sports. The programming was specifically aimed at younger viewers. This is an internet age, and they're not watching as much television, and they want to attract new advertising revenue streams. The Winter X Games were held every year in February at major ski resorts and attracted competitors from all over the world. In addition to snowboarding, snowmobiling, and skiing events were featured. The Summer X Games featured a variety of cross-country motorcycle racing events, motocross, and various men's and women's skateboarding events. The anti-establishment sentiment that provided the underlying appeal of these extreme sports also contributed to the growth of a multi-million-dollar entertainment business. Mixed martial arts was created for the cable television networks in the mid-1990s. The new sport blended over-the-top hype of professional wrestling with blatant exploitation of the imagery of unrestrained violence. The crass pandering to those who revel in blood and gore proved to be a winning concept. After some early setbacks that required strategic reconfiguring of the format, mixed martial arts grew in popularity to the point that it became an established niche sport like hockey. Some observers even suggested that the appeal of mixed martial arts equaled that of traditional boxing, and I think it does today. Unlike professional wrestling, which has not been considered a sport because of its reliance upon scripted bouts, it's more like a stage play. Mixed martial arts gained millions of enthusiasts because of its fights were competitive contests, but it proved unable to attract sustained coverage from the established sports media. And there's Rashad Evans, formerly of Niagara Wheatfield High School, just north of North Tonawanda, New York. This is a picture that's on eBay.com, and he was one of the champions in one of the weight classes at one time, just north of where I grew up. He also used to play football for the Falcons. The first Ultimate Fighting card was offered in Denver in November of 1993. Its promoters initially considered it to be a one-time event. About 3,500 curious spectators showed up to watch a series of bouts that featured men with various forms of combat expertise. Spectators filling in the McNichols Arena were told that there were no rules governing the mayhem promised, other than that the combatants were giving a no-holds-barred license to overpower their opponents. Promotional material suggested that knockouts would be frequent and even held out the prospect of far more ominous outcomes. The possibility of plenty of spilled blood was prominently mentioned. No one present that night could have imagined that within 15 years, mixed martial arts and ultimate fighting would become firmly established in the American popular culture, packing large arenas and drawing hundreds of thousands of fans, willing to pay substantial fees to watch on closed-circuit television. Eventually, mixed martial arts contestants included boxers, wrestlers, karate fighters, kickboxers, and even sumo wrestlers. The concept of no-holds-barred combat was an inspired one, at least from the perspective of promoters and cable television executives who grasped the inherent commercial promise of a new blood sport. Matches were soon staged that permitted all forms of bare-knuckle punching, kicking, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and throwing. Historians were reminded of the savagery of the traditional rough-and-tumble eye-gouging affairs of the pre-Civil War Appalachian region, although mixed martial arts rules prohibited eye-gouging. Promoters added an inspired, image-laden touch when they pitted the contestants against each other within the confines of what became known as the octagon, a grotesque, 8-sided chain-link cage, rather than the traditional 20-by-20-foot boxing ring. According to early press releases, there are no rules Contestants, they proclaimed, would battle until knockout, submission, doctor's intervention, or death. Initially, the sanctioning body that took the name Ultimate Fighting Championship permitted kicking an opponent who was down, hitting the groin, and choking. One standard tactic was to pin an opponent to the mat and slug him with the other hand. Fans apparently attracted by the announcement that referees were prohibited from stopping a bout. In reality, the referee was instructed to halt a contest when a contestant was considered unable to defend himself or willing to concede. And just as the new blood sport was gaining popularity as a pay-per-view television cable attraction, it was temporarily sidetracked by a prominent fan of traditional boxing, Senator John McCain of Arizona, who passed away in September 2018 while still in office. After viewing videotapes of several contests, he angrily denounced Ultimate Fighting as a degrading form of human cockfighting. He apparently took too literally the over-exaggerated promotional claims that death might occur to a combatant at any moment. McCain sent letters to state boxing commissions demanding that the sport be abolished. Promoters were quick to modify the rules, to mollify the senator and future presidential candidate, creating a baseline rule that protection of the health of the contestants was essential. And there were some deaths in 2007 and 2008. 2 died from brain hemorrhages following their bouts. But supporters were quick to point out that between 1950 and 2010, 120 boxers had died from injuries inflicted in the ring. The appeal of a full contact sport that incorporated many combat formats pushed the limits of what civilized society might permit under the guise of sporting competition, perhaps, but it was a logical outgrowth of the needs of the commercial television to continually find new ways to lure viewers, as fewer and fewer people are watching conventional television. And in 2005, the sport gained a level of unofficial sanction when the United States Army began to hold mixed martial arts championships. By that time, however, most state boxing commissions had voted to permit bouts, and the sport had spread across the globe. Like other extreme sports, Ultimate Fighting had gone mainstream. And that concludes HI 240.